It's another day in paradise. This is knowledge time. Welcome, alchemists. Okay, today we'll be reading from the book The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. We are in chapter 2, and this is part 4. Part 4, we'll be talking about the narcissistic couple. And it begins, the narcissistic couple. In 1862, several days before 32-year-old Leo Tolstoy was to wed Sonia Beers, only 18 years old at the time, he suddenly decided that there should be no secrets between them. As part of that, he brought her his diaries, and to his surprise, what she read made her weep and get quite angry as well. In these pages, he had written about his many previous love affairs, including his ongoing infatuation with a nearby peasant woman with whom he had had a child. He also wrote about the brothels he frequented, the gonorrhea he had caught, and damn, my man is just wow, and his endless gambling. She felt intense jealousy and disgust at the same time. Why make her read this? She accused him of having second thoughts, of not really loving her. Taken aback by this reaction, he accused her of the same. He wanted to share with her his old ways so that she would understand he was happily forsaking them for a new life with her. Why should she rebuke his attempt at honesty? She clearly did not love him as much as he had thought. Why was it so painful for her to say goodbye to her family before the wedding? Did she love them more than him? They managed to reconcile, and the wedding took place. But a pattern was set that would continue for 48 years. For Sonia, despite their frequent arguments, the marriage eventually settled into a relatively comfortable rhythm. She had become his most trusted assistant. Besides bearing 8 children in 12 years, wow, my man was not playing. 5 of whom survived. Oh, she carefully copied out his books for him, including War and Peace and Anna Karenina, and managed much of the business side of publishing his books. Everything seemed to be going along well enough. He was a rich man, from both the family estates he had inherited and the sales of his books. He had a large family who dotted on him. He was famous. But suddenly, at the age of 50, he felt immensely unhappy and ashamed of the books he had written. He no longer knew who he was. He was undergoing a deep spiritual crisis, and he found the Orthodox Church too strict and dogmatic to help him. His life had to change. He would write no more novels, and henceforth he would live like a common peasant. He would give up his property and renounce all copyrights on his books. And he asked his family to join him in his new life devoted to helping others and to spiritual matters. To his dismay, the family, Sonia leading the way, reacted angrily. He was asking them to give up their style of living, their comforts, and the children's future inheritance. Oh man. Sonia did not feel the need for any drastic change in their lifestyle, and she resented his accusations that she was somehow evil and materialistic for resisting. They fought, and neither budged. Now when Tolstoy looked at his wife, all he could see was someone who was using him for his fame and his money. That was clearly why she had married him. And when she looked at him, all she could see was a rank hypocrite. Although he had given up his property rights, he continued living like a lord and asking her for money for his habits. He dressed like a peasant, but he fell ill. But if he fell ill, he would travel to the south in a luxury private railway coach to a villa in which he could convalescent, and despite his new celibacy, he kept making her pregnant. Tolstoy craved a simple spiritual life, and she was now the main stumbling block to this. He found her presence in the house oppressive. He wrote her a letter in which he finished by saying, "You attribute what has happened to everything, except the one thing, that you are the unwitting, unintentional cause of my sufferings. A struggle to the death is going on between us." Out of his increasing bitterness at her materialistic ways, he wrote the novella, The Kreutzer Sonata, clearly based on their marriage and painting her in the worst light. For Sonia, the effect of all this was that she felt like she was losing her mind. Finally, in 1894, she snapped. Imitating one of the characters in Tolstoy's story, she decided to commit suicide by walking out into the snow and freezing herself to death. Oh, wow. A family member caught up with her and dragged her back to the house. She repeated the attempt twice more, with no better effect. Now the pattern became sharper and more violent. Tolstoy would push her buttons. She would do something desperate. Tolstoy would feel remorse for his coldness and beg for her forgiveness. He would give in to her on some issues, for instance, allowing the family to retain the copyrights of his earlier books. Then some new behavior on her would make him regret this. She constantly tried to pit the children against him. She had to read everything he wrote in his diaries, and if he had hid them, she would somehow find them and read them on the sly. She watched his every move. He would berate her wildly for her meddling, sometimes falling ill in the process, which made her regret her actions. What was holding them together? Each one craved the acceptance and love of the other, but it seemed impossible to accept that anymore. After years of suffering through this, in late October of 1910, Tolstoy finally had enough. In the middle of the night, he stole away from the house with a doctor friend accompanying him, determined to finally leave Sonia. He was trembling all the way, in terror of being surprised and overtaken by his wife. But finally he boarded a train and got away from her. When she got the news, Sonia attempted suicide yet again, throwing herself in the nearby pond, only to be rescued just in time. She wrote Tolstoy a letter, begging him to come back. Yes, she would change her ways. She would renounce all luxuries. She would become spiritual. She would love him unconditionally. She would not live without him. For Tolstoy, his taste of freedom was short-lived. The newspapers were now full of accounts of his running away from his wife. Everywhere the train stopped, reporters, devoted fans, and the curious mobbed him. He would not take any more the packed and freezing conditions on the train. Soon he felt deathly ill and had to be carried to a station master's cottage near the railway tracks in some out-of-the-way village. In bed, it was clear now he was dying. He heard that Sonia had arrived in town, but could not bear the thought of seeing her now. The family kept her outside, where she continued to peer through the window at him as he lay dying. Finally, when he was unconscious, she was allowed in. She knelt beside him, kissed him continually on the forehead, and whispered into his ear, "Forgive me. Please forgive me." He died shortly thereafter. A month later, a visitor to the Tolstoy house reported the following words from Sonia. "What happened to me? What came over me? How could I have done it? You know I killed him. Oh, wow. Interpretation. Leo Tolstoy displayed all of the signs of the deep narcissist. His mother had died when he was 2 and left a giant hole in him that he could never fill. Although some he tried to do so with his numerous affairs. He behaved recklessly in his youth, as if this could somehow make him feel alive and whole. He felt continually disgusted with himself and could not figure out who exactly he was. He poured this uncertainty into his novels, assuming different roles in the characters he created. And by the age of 50, he finally fell into a deep crisis over his fragmented self. Sonia herself rated high on the self-absorption scale, but in looking at people, we tend to overemphasize their individual traits and not look at the more complex picture of how each side in a relationship continually shapes the other. A relationship has a life and personality all its own. And a relationship can also be deeply narcissistic, insinuating, or even bringing out the narcissistic tendencies of both sides. What generally makes a relationship narcissistic is the lack of empathy that makes the partners retreat deeper and deeper into their own defensive positions. In the case of the Tolstoys, this started right away with the reading of his diary. Each side had their divergent values through which they viewed the order. To Sonia, raised in a conventional household, this was the act of a man who clearly regretted his marriage proposal. To Tolstoy, the iconoclastic artist, her reaction meant she was incapable of seeing into his soul, of trying to understand his desire for a new married life. They each misunderstood the other and fell into hardened positions that lasted for 48 years. Tolstoy's spiritual crisis em- empana- epitomized this narcissistic dynamic. If only in that moment they each could have attempted to see this action through the eyes of the other. Tolstoy could have clearly foreseen her reactions. She had lived her whole life in relative comfort, which had helped her manage the frequent pregnancies and upbringing of so many children. She had never been deeply spiritual. Their connection had always been more physical. Why should he expect her to suddenly change? His demands were almost sadistic. He could have simply explained his own side without demanding that she follow him, even expressing his understanding of her own position and needs. That would have revealed true spirituality on his part, and she, instead of focusing only on his hypocrisy, could have seen a man who was clearly unhappy with himself, someone who had never felt love enough since early childhood and who was undergoing a very real personal crisis. She could have offered her love and support for his new life while gently declining to follow him all the way. Such use of empathy has the opposite effect of mutual narcissism. Coming from one side, it tends to soften the other one up and invite his or her empathy as well. It is hard to stay in one's defensive position when the other is seeing and expressing your side and entering your spirit. It beckons you to do the same. Secretly, people yearn to let go of their resistance. It is exhausting to continually be so defensive and suspicious. The key to employing empathy within a relationship is to understand the value system of the other person, which inevitably is different from yours. What they interpret as signs of love or attention or generosity tends to diverge from your way of thinking. These value systems are largely formed in early childhood and are not consciously created by people. Keeping in mind their value system will allow you to enter their spirit and perspective precisely in the moment you would normally turn defensive. Even deep narcissists can be pulled out of their shell in this way because such attention is so rare. Measure all of your relationship on the narcissism spectrum. It is not one person or the other, but the dynamic itself that must be altered. Okay, so that's the end of part 4. Tomorrow will be part 5. Part 5 is the healthy narcissist, the mood reader. Oh, that's interesting. And that will be pretty much the last part in chapter 2. And then after that will be chapter 3. See through people's masks. Oh, interesting. In conclusion, subscribe to the channel, comment any questions you have, like if the information was inspiring for you, and share this knowledge with other alchemists. Also, follow me on Instagram for more progressive knowledge. My Instagram is you can catch me at max_Bugatti_8008. I'm all about family first. I'm an investor in stocks and alternative energy. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an aerospace botanist. I have a confidence building program, and currently I'm out here in the East Bay, San Fran, doing it the right way. West Side. While you're slaying dragons, I'll be taming them.